So, the Global Fighters League has just announced that its debut event on May 24th and its follow up event on May 25th has been quote unquote postponed due to issues with investors. And it seems like the GFL dumpster fire has finally collapsed. And obviously, this was inevitable from the beginning, but I think a lot of people were interested to see just how far it could get. But from the beginning, this was very clearly not serious in one way or another. When they first announced the fighters that they had on roster, a lot of people, sure, people like Shogun who were in their mid or 40s or in their mid 40s who should not be fighting. Frank Mir should not be fighting. And then you see people like Yoel Romero, who's signed to Dirty Boxing, I believe. You see Jeremy Stevens, who is, just going back to the UFC. You see Rashad Evans, who hadn't even signed any contracts. Sage Northcutt, who is literally in the PFL. And a lot of people came out and said they weren't actually offered anything or they didn't sign any contracts, but they just announced them as signed anyway. And then we saw the draft where they were pre-leaked and pre-written drafts, so they couldn't even do that properly. The draft announcements were AI, so they couldn't even afford a proper tech crew to announce everything. And then just the matchups obviously are going to be terrible because half of these fighters are either really old and juiced up on steroids like Yoel Romero, or are just simply old and ridden with brain damage and KO losses. And the cracks first started to show, obviously, with fighters that weren't actually signed. But you had Frank Mir pull out of his fight with Fabricio Verdum with an injury, and then Verdum then promptly retired, and then fighters taking fights in other promotions. And it just, I don't understand how the GFL thought it was going to be a sustainable business model. Because the word got out that they were going to pay their heavyweights, the UFC heavyweights, $1.4 million per fight. Right, and let me put this into perspective. They're mainly going to generate money from pay-per-views or ticket sales, right? If you sell a pay-per-view at, let's say, $80 to $100, the PFL with Ngannou could not sell over 10,000 pay-per-views. The GFL with, who is their most recognizable name? Tyrone Woodley, maybe. Right? You see my point. So they were never in a position where they could pay fighters. They weren't even in a position where they could have a proper draft. And now you see investors who are not meeting their quotas or just not investing money into it, clearly because the company is simply a scam that was born to crash and burn. I'm curious. I don't know if there's a crypto thing tied to it to get investors interested. I don't know if Darren Owen is secretly dealing behind the scenes and he needs something to launder money. But the entire concept just didn't seem well thought out, and it actually pretty piss poor. It's actually quite disappointing because I think the PFL, or at least I thought quite highly of Bellator as a competitor to the UFC. Sure, it was never going to get the numbers, but at least it put on some good, solid fights, and it had a solid roster, and it could just keep itself somewhat consistent. The PFL now is having a lot of issues because they're having trouble maintaining the Bellator fighters and just bringing in the money that they got from, buying Ngannou. But even then, they still do put on shows and events and can still function as a company. The GFL can't even make its damn debut, and that is just laughable. They put all this money into signing these names, and I guarantee you, none of these people are going to make any money. They are selling empty promises to fighters, and it really does piss me off because you get these companies promising that they will pay people good, right? They'll treat the fighters well, and then they just simply can't deliver. And if they do, they immediately go bankrupt. Ngannou was promised $8 million to fight Renan Ferreira, and he probably got paid $8 million. The PFL did not make $8 million on that event. Not even close. I would be surprised if they made $2 million. I think from the pay-per-views they would have made $1 million, and I don't think they would have sold $1 million in tickets because I think it was in Saudi or Abu Dhabi. So they're not making anything close to profit. So they're just burning money. Nate Diaz versus Jorge Masvidal is a good example. Nate Diaz left the UFC to go get paid more money. Right? He was promised $9 million. The event didn't even gross $1.5 million. Right? The person who ran the event had to file for bankruptcy because they're just making these absolutely boneheaded, empty-skulled promises to fighters, and then they simply can't deliver. And while I don't think the UFC fighter pay is perfect, it is significantly better than what a lot of people think it is. And I think credit, needs to be put. One Championship, I like what One Championship is doing with the fighters. They do not pay their fighters better than UFC. I promise you that, right? Or they at least pay on the same level, right? With the PFL, it's probably about the same. And if they pay more, they are not going to be able to keep doing that. And I really think people should start to understand the situation with fighter pay and the situation with the companies that claim to be supporting fighter pay, because they don't. They really don't. The PFL just cut its $1 million tournament in half to $500,000. If you think that the PFL can keep, paying fighters, quote unquote, what they're worth, you're delusional, right? And again, UFC's not perfect, but it does things damn well, and it's the best out of any other MMA promotion that's out there. So the GFL is now a laughingstock. If they do make it to June and they do have a debut event, I'm going to tune in just for the absolute meme of it. But yeah, I just wanted to discuss that because it finally seems to have ended. But anyway, guys, just let me know your thoughts in the comments below. These kind of videos don't take me too long to make. I enjoy making the technical breakdowns a lot more, but this I just had to discuss. So you guys know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, and see you later.